Well, how's everybody doing? We have an extra special camera guest today. So we're going to cover some basics today because this is going to be a reference video so everyone can reference it in Freedom Village. So I just would cover some basics today and efficiencies as well. It's how to do a better sit to stand and how to get moving up off your chair a little easier. So this is a great tutoring, right, of how to get up off your chair easier. Let's start with the first things first, guys. Let's just warm up a little bit, right, like we normally do. So get that chest up nice and tall, get that chin to get in, and create what? Good posture awareness. So I have a little bit of an anterior pelvic tilt. And let's just go into a nice exercise of take the hands in a high active arc, get those range of motion going on the shoulders, get that reach going, and then just come down nice and easy, high active range, high active arch, good test of shoulder mobility, and takes a little bit of shoulder mobility to get into this position, right? So if you feel like you can do it, please get those hands up as high as you can, breathe as you do it, and just keep that high active arch. Give me a few more reps, warm up that upper body, right? Nice little sitting jumping jack is really what it is, and then take a little break, shake it on off so we get those nice shoulder muscles warm. Let's talk about upper trapezius awareness because I think this is a fundamental again, right? Our clavicle has to move up off our shoulder to get us in and out of impingement syndromes. So if we do that at a high level, we can happily have a shoulder that's healthy. So let's do that. Get yourself in a good neutral spine position. Draw those shoulders back into a little bit of retraction and then just come up into elevation. Put the shoulders behind the ears and breathe as you do, right? So the shoulders come up. I use origin insertion action of the trap, which is inserted behind my ear, not to the ear. And you should feel those trapezius muscles start to engage, right? And then slowly lower them down towards the floor. You should feel the contraction happen at a high level when we take it up. So now take it up, push the trap up and back, and squeeze that upper trapezius muscle. It's a shoulder shrug, right? A fundamental of this kind of shoulder movements. You have to have clavicle up off the shoulder to have a functional shoulder at a high level. And then just come back down nice and slowly. Let the shoulders glide down, and that feels pretty good, right? So creating, again, trap awareness, trap strength. So not tightness, not weakness, but a trap that's able to elevate the clavicle up, and that's super important to do. Let's get into a nice little hip hinge. So let's start to work on the hips. We have the shoulders loose. Let's work a little hip hinge. So just go into the mummy position, right? So cross those arms over and just start to put your nose over your toes. Keep your spine neutral. And what I mean by neutral spine is, right, we're not too far back looking like we're up towards the ceiling tiles, and we're not into that slumpy slumberton position or a forward flex position. We're in a neutral spine position, right? So everything is in alignment. And then just take that mummy position over the toes. So again, nose over toes. If you could put a tattoo on yourself after age 70, it would say nose over toes on your wrist, right? Or somewhere you can see it. And then you got to come up out of that hip hinge and get yourself back in neutral spine. This is a key to getting into a sit to stand, right? You have to be able to hip hinge first and foremost, right? So let's do it correctly. Nice chest up, keep the chin in, and just start to drive the nose over the toes, right? And that's a great way to get into a proper sit to stand motion. And then just drive it back up, and then you feel fluid, right? It's also called a hip rocker. So you're just moving the hips forward and back in a hip hinge. Let the hands come down nice and easy. Shake it on off a little bit. And let's talk about the next thing you need to do a correct and efficient sit to stand, right? You have to have this movement because we have to be able to get mobile and get up in life. So next thing we have to do is think about our legs being at least hip width apart, right? I see a lot of people do a sit to stand. They're too narrow of a base. So they come in too narrow and they expect to get up in this narrow base. Remember, your narrow base is creating what? Less center of gravity. So you have to be wider. Wider is better. It creates a more centered base. So I come out at least hip width, the shoulder width apart, 10 degrees out with the toes. So I just create a little angle of attack. For what? My glutes to actually engage as well in the sit to stand. Not necessarily my quads being dominant, my glutes getting connected. Remember, it's the strongest, biggest muscle in your body, so we better connect the glutes. And now we're in a good position. Occlude your legs back a little. Occlusion is a word meaning just kick back towards the chair, get yourself into a little bit of knee flexion. And that's a good setup for success in a sit to stand. Now we go back to the mummy position, right? The hip hinge that we just learned how to do correctly. nose over toes. Remember the tattoo on your arm or chest that you probably need to do. So we got to remember that mantra, nose over toes. So that gets us in a good position. We are at the edge of our chair already, so that's a good thing. Don't be at the back of your chair because that is no good. You have to scoot your butt to the edge of the chair for a certain level of success and efficiency with a sit to stand. So again, good posture up. I'm at the edge of the chair. I go into my nose over toes position. Right here is where we transfer body weight, right? So I'm transferring the weight into the heels, not the toes, and I start to push up. I start to push up until I feel a nice solid extension of the hips, a good sit to stand maneuver, and then squeeze those gluteal muscles. And then once you're up, right, you're stabilized. You're able to have this position because you're stable, your hip width, your knees pushed out, and I'm in a good stance, right? So you're solid as a rock. Now what do? We just reverse the whole process. So I come in, I push the car door back. I say that as a phrase because it gets your glutes to set back. We're basically doing another hip hinge, and then I slowly start to sit down towards the back of the chair. My knees go forward, a ton of heel pressure still, and then I'm in a solid position, right? It's a solid sit to stand. Some nuances, right, to do this absolutely correctly is to be more efficient with the movement. So how do you do that? You draw the knees out. We need the knees to go out. So you don't want to be in what's called valgus, which is knock knee. You want to be in varus, which is pushing the knee outward to get those glutes to actually respond a little more. So that's going to help you be more efficient with your sit to stand, right? We were talking about efficiencies of how to move better, and then you have to have a level of fitness to go with it. When you combine the two, bang, right? You're now gonna sit to stand, piece of cake, and be stable. Just to go through some mistakes that people will do in a sit to stand. Number one, they won't hip hinge properly, right? So the first thing they do in a hip hinge is flex the spine. So I'm in my mummy position, just like we started the day, and then what do? They take the nose and they drive it right to their navel. So they do this, and that's gonna be very tough to do a sit to stand because my nose, again, is not over my toes. So this is incorrect. Right off the gate, right? You're not gonna have an easy time getting up and out of this position because I gotta start rocking forward when I'm flexing my spine. When I start rocking forward, I start to get in and into my toe versus my heel. When I start to drive my toe, I start to go in with a little bit of valgus activity. In other words, knock knee. So I come in, I go flexion with the spine. I see my knees will start just driving and then I go right into the toe position. I start to come up, I get shaky, and then I go back and then I can't keep my balance, right? So that's the biggest mistake I see with a sit to stand across the board, right? Across the board, wherever I go, I see sit to stands just improperly executed. It's not about your fitness, it's about your efficiencies and how to properly do it, right? So you have to be efficient. And then, of course, the fitness level comes in, and then you're off to the races. So just remind yourself, you got to get into the mummy position for training purposes, right? You don't do this at the restaurant. People are going to look at you a little funny. You just simply want to do this as a training tool to get better at your sit to stand. And then once we have it, it's a mantra in our brain, and we can just sit to stand, right? And that's a better way to do it. Go nose over toes, push out the knees, think heel pressure, and then you're good to go. Be at the edge of your chair. All those things combined are going to get you up very good, very quickly. And you don't have to have a ton of strength. You're just creating an efficiency to be able to move into a sit to stand at a high level. So let's practice again. Let's do it correctly again. I just showed you the incorrect version. Let's do the correct version. So again, what do? Chest up, neutral spine. What do I do next? Nose over toes. I start going into a hip hinge. I now start pushing up through the heels. I rise the chest up. I still stay level, and then I come in and create that sit to stand action, right? You should be able to do that at a pretty good level if you do all those things, those keys, right, to success. Hip hinging being number one. Legs out for a little bit of glute action, and then stabilize yourself by having 3 points of contact with heel pressure being at a bias, right? So we want the heels to be in contact the most. That's going to drive yourself up. The most power you can have is through the glutes, and that's more heel than toe, right? So let's reverse the whole process again. What do? We hip hinge back. So we kick the car door back, we set this whole thing back into motion, we drive the knees forward, and we have a nice, good, solid sit to stand, right? Again, drive the knees out. Don't let them come in because you're going to start getting into a little bit of weakness. The adductors aren't as strong as the glutes, and you're going to get a little bit into the toes. So that's the first thing, once you get your hip hinge set, don't start driving your knees together and then come up, because you're gonna go right into the inside of your foot, you're in pronation, and you're gonna start driving through your toes, not your heels. So that's a quick tip to also be more efficient. Keep those knees out, stay out, get the glutes involved, and that's a good way to keep efficient with your sit to stand, right? So we like those good sit to stands. It's gonna keep you mobile, and you're gonna be able to execute that and then do your daily thing, right? If you can't sit up, right? If you can't sit to stand at a high level, you tend to be what? You start getting lethargic, you start not using those muscles, and you start being what? A little bit more stationary, and that's what we can't have. We got to keep you moving. So the next biggest pet peeve of mine, my arm doesn't have chairs, or it doesn't have arms on the side of this chair, right? So that's a good thing, but most chairs have arms, right? So when you do a sit to stand, people are using too much upper body. So do not use the arms on your chair, right? That's a big no-no, because what happens? I start getting into a bad habit of pushing off from the shoulder, right? And that's not going to get you there in time. Your legs are going to get weaker. You have to drive from the legs, not the arms. And it also creates a shoulder impingement situation, right? So I'm using a lot of upper body. I'm pushing from that chair back. I typically can't even hip hinge as good because I'm pushing off the chair, and I come up, and it's a struggle, right? And my legs got to be the driver to get me up. This is just going to force less power into the legs and more upper body tightness, and of course impinging motions. So it's not a good practice to do. Do not have your arms on the chair. Keep them on the side, keep them in front of you, but don't use the armchair. It's a good thing to keep the legs strong. As you also sometimes, just a little sidebar, you have wheels on the chair too. Sometimes you have chairs with wheels, right? And if you get in this habit of going into hip hinge, pushing on that, you're gonna go like this in your sit stand, and that chair's gonna go away, right? Because you're pushing it from the arms and the upper body, it's gonna go sliding back. So you don't want to get in the habit of doing that for multiple reasons. But the biggest reason is your legs start to get a little bit weaker, your upper body is working too hard, and that's no good. So you've got to remember this, because it's essential to keep you in and powerful and mobile, right? So use those legs and use them correctly, and that's a good review of the sit to stand exercise. All right, so we got that done, right? Feeling confident about a sit to stand? Everyone got it down pretty good, right? So that's a good technique. It's efficient. You don't have to have a high level of fitness. It's just being aware, right, of how to do it correctly, and then you're gonna be A-okay for the rest of your life, right? And that's what we need. You're mobile and working hard. All right, let's get into a little shoulder mobility, right? So let's talk about the shoulders again. Let's just structurally think about shoulders and what they do, right? They hold ourselves upright, right? We gotta have our shoulders connected so they can keep everything in line. So how do we do some shoulder activities? We just come out, take the palms up, and then hold them in the supinated position. Draw your shoulders back into retraction as far as they can go, and then hold that position. Now the next thing I do is I want to tuck that chin. So tuck that chin back in. That's called neck extension or retraction of the cervical spine, and then hold that position. You should start to feel the scapula start to fire, right? The shoulder blades start to fire. All these things that are opening up your pecs, and that's a good thing. So it's shoulder health. It's postural stability. It's all these things that help us stay upright, right? So we don't get into a bad posture. So hold that, keep those shoulder blades tucked, keep that chin tucked, and now slowly again, start to come up. It's the warm-up we did. We primed for this exercise in our simple warm-up, but this time now we're working a little harder. We're keeping those shoulder blades extremely flat, and we're coming up into a high active arc range of motion. You should not feel any impinging of the shoulders as I do that, right? If you do, we know we have some work to do. So if I come through this high active arc range of motion, I shouldn't feel any kind of niggles, right, in the shoulder. I shouldn't feel any kind of restriction. If you do, we've got to address it, right? And that could be through multiple reasons, right? We could have just a weakness in our rotator. We could have an underlying injury. But just take note, right? If I have a little bit of a niggle in the shoulder here, I got to work it out a little bit, all right? So get that chest up, draw those palms back, and now come high active arch, and just be aware of that. Keep the shoulders flat. That's called a posterior tilt of your scapula, and then just come up over the top of your ears, and just note any kind of impinging motions in the shoulder as I do that. You should be free of any of those things. But let's say right about here, I feel my shoulder kind of go a little bit of a click, or a little bit of just a weird feeling. I would stay right here right now, and I'd push back a little further into retraction. I would then hold this position, and I would just slowly come up and down through that motion until you feel that shoulder just not click anymore, right? So we're working resiliency through the range of motion where it's just not as happy. So it needs a little bit more addressing. So that's why we do this action, right? We're just waking it up, getting it through this range of motion in this angle of attack. So that's a good thing to think. When I have a little pinch or a little niggle, stay in there, because it's just saying to you, I'm not happy right here. I got to build a little bit more resiliency and strength through this range of motion. Once you feel that kind of work out, come back down and then reset your whole range of motion back up. So again, shoulder blades flat. I set them flat. Keep those things flat. Now again, how do I go wrong in this exercise? I like to show again disassociation on how an exercise is done incorrectly, and that's why we learn things to do it correctly. So what we'll do is, if I go into a slumpy slumperton position, so I draw my shoulders into this anterior position, I go into what's called, right, an anterior tilt of the shoulder blade. That's not good, right? I'm forcing myself to already be in an impingement biomechanical position. So if I come up now when I'm in slumpy slumperton, I'm teaching my body what? To be in a bad postural position. It's not that you can't do it in this position, but it's a bad thing for your anatomical positioning of your shoulder. And if you continually do that, it just reinforces bad habits, right? So I come up out of that position, I go into a thoracic spine position, and then I hold myself in this position. Now I'm in a better position, my shoulder blades are flat, and then I do the same thing. I just come up over top of the ears, I get into this full range of motion. I note again any kind of impingements or a little bit of niggles in the shoulder. If I don't have any, good, because now you're working that shoulder through a high active range and a pain-free range, right? Just take note and then be, yeah, okay, now it feels better, right? You start to feel that shoulder maybe have that movement without any kind of impinging motion, and then just shake it on out, right? So that's what we do. We just shake it on out a little bit and reset for another exercise. So good stability exercise, really a very simple action, but a really good action to do for shoulder health. It's called high active arc, and it works really good for your shoulder movement and ability to do that. Now let's talk about going into sagittal plane. So this movement was a frontal plane motion, right? So now we got to do sagittal plane motion, which is what? We're turning our palms in, and then we're coming up over top of the head, but in the sagittal plane, which is this direction, right? We're going back and forth with shoulder flexion, shoulder extension. Now with this one, just let your shoulders move. You just want your shoulders to freely move through this movement. Just think good posture, keep your tummy tight, and then get all the way up over the top into what's called the touchdown position, right? So touchdown position is overhead flexion, and just rise up as far as you can. Push your palms up into the ceiling as far as they'll go, creating a little bit of self-traction in the spine as I do that, and it's a good thing for shoulder health and spinal health, right? So a nice touchdown position is an excellent exercise for shoulder health, and just glide that arm back down to neutral and then push it back into shoulder extension. So now just drive them back as far as you can, working shoulder extension and also getting those triceps to extend. So you should feel the back of your arm and the back of those shoulder blades start to get a little bit of love, right? So you're feeling good range of motion. This is in the sagittal plane. So this is what? The walk motion we do, right? When we walk with arms swinging back and forth in the bilateral fashion, right? So going back and forth is the walk stride, and we should be walking with our arms moving, right? Because that increases range of motion. So we need that range of motion when we walk. So getting this drill just as a mantra again for good range of motion health. Take those arms to the side, shake it on out a little bit. Let's do one more time. So again, come up just freely through an active touchdown. Come up as high as you can. Work those shoulder blades up. They elevate. That's what they're supposed to do. And then hold that position. You feel a nice elongation of the spine, and it feels really good. And it's great for spinal health and shoulder mobility health in overhead flexion. And now take it down nice and slow. Breathe through it. Come back through into shoulder extension, which is going behind your back. And then hold that position. You should feel your triceps start to fire, right? Your back is still upright, right? Don't let yourself go slumpy slumperton. Keep the back up straight. Keep that chin in. Keep that chest up. And you should feel those back extensor muscles start to fire, and your tricep, right? Because you're in an extended position. And then just come back to center neutral, shake it on off a little bit, and then we'll disassociate with this activity. So again, disassociation is just a way you don't do the exercise, or I wouldn't want you to do it this way, but it's trained in this technique in a lot of ways. So we don't want to train in poor technique. So what do? You get this chest straight up, you push the arms down, and you hold them down. Now think again, arms being pushed down, scapula's going going down, right? So you're pushing the scapulas down into what's called depression. Hold that shoulder down and then slowly try to come up into overhead flexion again. Your shoulder does not like it, right? In fact, you start to stop right about there, right? It's hard to even get them to go up. If you're pushing the shoulder blade down, it's hard for the shoulder to go up, isn't it? It doesn't like to do it. You're creating an impingement situation. So just be cognizant when you're in overhead flexion. If you're just raising up your arm, just let it go. There's no reason to have it in any kind of depression or flexion or extension state of your scapula. You're just going to simply raise them up, right? So I just showed you a disassociation restriction of your shoulder, and it's often taught that people should hold their shoulders down or together and then come up over the top. Once you start doing that, you tend to go about right there and you stop, right? So you're reducing your range of motion by doing that. It's not a great thing for your shoulder. So just be aware, just let your glenohumeral rhythm happen, right? So how do you do that? You just simply use good posture, you come up, and you just go touchdown, right? It just naturally happens. You have a glenohumeral rhythm that just naturally happens. You don't have to do anything else. Hold that position, come back down, and then shake it on off, right? So that's a way we want to train overhead flexion. Don't think, again, any kind of movement restrictions with the shoulder. Just keep them nice and moving fluidly. And that's the way to go for that activity. All right, let's do a little bit of stretch, a little bit of mobility. And these are classic ones, again, to do to keep yourself mobile, right? So mobility stretching is a little different than flexibility stretching, right? The two are interchangeable, but they are definitely different. So how do we test that? We're going to do an active mobile stretch, and we're going to do an active flexibility test. The two are different, right? So we have to be aware of stretching and how to stretch correctly. I'm going to do active mobile versus flexibility stretch. So let's do the hip flexor just to show you the difference between flexibility and mobility, right? So let's come in, just raise your hip flexor up. So I have this good position, just draw it up as high as it can go, and then hold that position. You start to feel your hip flexor fire. That's a good thing. Hold that range of motion, right? So that's about as far as I can go, right? That's all I can do. And then let it come down nice and slowly, and we'll do the other side. Come in again, shift your body weight a little bit to the left, and then come up with that hip flexor as high as you can in the chest, and then hold, right? That's as high as you can go, right? You got it as far as you can go, and now come back. Now, that's your mobility, right? That's as far as I can go. Now we can get into flexibility. Flexibility will be a little bit higher range of motion. So come up, same thing, drive your hip flexor up. There's your active mobility, and I can't go any higher. Take your two hands, put it around the knee, and now go up a little higher. Pull it up, right? So there's your active flexibility, right? See the difference between mobility and flexibility? Both work good, but I'd rather have you what? Actively mobile, right? Not passive. You can't have, this passive flexibility doesn't last either. So you're not creating a mobile joint, you're just passively flexible. So we want an active mobile joint versus passive flexibility. And then drop it down nice slow. Let's check the other side just to make sure we have symmetry here. So again, come back up, hold that, and that's my active mobility. I take the hands, I put it right around my knee, and now I can pull it up higher, right? I can pull it up higher. There's your active flexibility, right? And that's the difference between mobility and flexibility, right? The ability of the joint to move through a range of motion is your mobility. Flexibility is the joint to move to its end range of motion, but generally it takes a little bit of active assistance to get there, right? And that's a good drill to do to get that active mobility and flexibility going. So let's do a little bit of the hamstring. Same idea, but now actively mobilely stretching. So how do we do that? We center ourselves straight up. Let's kick the leg straight out. Go to terminal knee extension again. So the knee is terminal. What I mean by that is, yeah, lock your joint out. Go fully out. It's perfectly good to lock a knee. Don't let anyone tell you keep a soft knee. It's okay to lock that joint out, right? Because we have to get full range of motion, right? And it actually helps the knee get a little bit out of that deflection. Deflection is actually worse. So having a bent knee creates a little bit more stress in your knee than going out to terminal knee. Hold that. You should feel your quad, right? Getting a little bit of love here. And now just simply push that leg down into the floor. Nice and slow as you go. Push the heel down on the floor. Put your hands on your hips, and let's practice nose over toe and get that hamstring actively, mobily stretched. There's nothing passive about this, right? You're actively doing it. And now just simply put the nose over the toes. You should feel the hamstring start to get a big stretch feel, right? So it's actively, again, mobily stretching. You didn't passively do it. You earned every inch, and that's a good thing. Getting the hamstring to be mobile through its range of motion Way better than just passive flexibility. Come back up nice and easy. Take a deep breath. Heel slide that leg back. Let's do the other side. So again, actively mobilely stretching the hamstring. Big difference. And again, you know what passive is, right? So I put something around my leg and I might go right and pull it up. That would be a passive flexibility. This is actively mobilely stretching, the way we want you to stretch more, okay? So take the leg, extend it, terminal knee. I got the quadricep on. The rec fem is feeling really good right there. You can touch it and probe it a little bit, make sure it's on, right? Yep, it's on. Got a little bit of heat building up in that quad. And now just drive that heel right to the floor. Push down with some good effort, maybe 30 to 40% of your true effort. Put your hands on your hips again. And now just again, put the nose over the toes. Breathe as you do. Go to a stretch level of, on a scale of 1 to 10, it should be in the 4, 5, 6, 7 range. 7 at the max. So again, just a nice feel, but don't feel like you're going so far that your hamstring gets way too much stretch. Be careful when you stretch, right? Again, levels of 1 to 7 versus a 10. You don't want to be 10s because that just gets the stretch reflex a little bit too tight. And you don't open up that channel of flexibility and mobility. Come back down and come back up and then relax it. Shift the heel back in nice and slow. And that's a great way to stretch out that hamstring, right? Actively mobilely stretching. Great way to go, right? So it's not passive, it's mobilization. And that's a good thing. Let's go into a little bit of neck and then you guys are almost done today. So we hit some key groups, right? So good efficiencies to stand, a nice active mobility shoulder, a nice active mobile hip and hamstring. So these are just classic. These are fundamentals you should do and master, right? So let's do the neck, the last one, the forgotten one. So what do? We get straight up in our posture and we're just gonna go turtle out of a shell. Again, we're disassociation where the neck shouldn't be. So the neck comes out, you push the neck out, you get the turtle way out of a shell. Right there, I feel my cervical spine not liking this movement, right? It doesn't like it because it's per square pound a square foot starts happening outside 1 inch, past neutral spine. So pressure on your spine is happening when the turtle gets out of a shell. So what do? You take it and you tuck that chin back in. You take it and you push it back in as far as it'll go until it gets into this extended position. So this is neck extension or cervical retraction. And then hold. You start to feel the neck flexors start to engage, right? So a really good thing is to keep those muscles nice and active in your neck. So neck flexors are super important. And now take it to the next level. Just take your chin and drop it to the sternum. So in neck extension, take your chin and just drop it to your sternum and then hold that pose. You're gonna start to feel a ton of firing in your neck flexors, right? So it's really gonna wake up these groups, right? So good strength needed to do neck extension, and now with chin down, it's really gonna fire those neck flexors. Excellent exercise. I would do this as well as much as I could really throughout the day. It's an excellent exercise and it promotes swallowing too at a basic level. So it's good stuff to keep your neck strong. Come back up out of that, go into again, a little bit of the turtle out of a shell. So put your chin forward, disassociate a little bit. We know that doesn't feel so good. And then we drive it back in. So neck extension happens. I tuck that chin, I keep it there and I slowly build down into some strength by tucking the chin to the sternum. I hold that position, I breathe as I do it, and I start to feel those neck flexor muscles start to fire. That's a great thing, right? So you're getting some good activation and mobile activation of those neck flexor muscles. Come back up, relax in the neutral spine, and then just shake it on out, right? So again, we're experiencing a little bit of what we call stacking the position. So my neck is in line, my shoulders are in line, my hips are in line, and then I have less problems throughout my life, right? Because I'm in a better position of postural stability. So that's just one thing. Again, practice throughout the day, a little bit of neck extension. And those are the exercises that we need to do, right? A basic daily combination of doing a correct sit to stand, some active, high active arch, some good shoulder flexibility and mobility, and then the hips with the hamstrings. It's gonna keep you really solidly active, right, throughout your life. Thank you, and have a good day. I'll see you tomorrow, all right? Good job, guys.